Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to this meeting of the Local Review Body for the 26th of May 2025. As is usual, I'll start by introducing us on the top table. I'm Councillor Bob Braun. I am convener of the Local Review Body. To my right is Councillor Ken Harvey, and to my left, Councillor Richard Waters. We are, by requirement, all members of the Planning and Placemaking Committee. To my far right is Ms. Leslie Tierney. She is a planning advisor to the Local Review Body. She has had no involvement with any of these cases prior to them being put forward for appeal. To my left, beyond Councillor Waters, is Mr. Callum MacLeod. He is our legal advisor for this afternoon, and beyond him is Ms. Audrey Brown, who's from Democratic Services. So, colleagues, do we have any declarations of interest this afternoon? Councillor Waters?
No declarations of interest.
And Councillor Harvey?
No declarations of interest.
Thank you, members. Next item on the agenda is the minutes of the previous meeting, which was 24th of February. As I was the only member there, I think, of the three of us, I'm happy to approve those if they're recorded. We now come to the agenda itself, and we have 4 items on here. So we'll start with item 4.1. This is a residential development in principle of land 140 metres northeast of the bungalow Benarty Road in Kelty. Ms. Tierney, if you could introduce the case for us.
Thank you, convener. So just a presentation first. So the location of the application site to the north of Kelty there, east of the M90 towards Loch Ower, where the yellow star is. And then kind of coming closer into the application site, so you can see where it accesses the main road, the B996, towards Loch Ower. And then zooming in again, a cluster of houses there to the west, and then the application site within the yellow circle area. This is a historical map showing the appeal site in the middle there of the red dot, and its location within the Benarty Colliery previous development area. This is the site location plan submitted with the planning application. So obviously the access, the long line up to the main road, and then the red line around the application site within the green area there, the former colliery site. And then this is the site plan, if you like. So it shows the levels, current foliage on the site, and the access into the site of the road there. And then this is the indicative layout which has been provided. The application is in principle, so this is only indicative. 5 dwellings in a kind of courtyard configuration. And then just some information from some of the documents that were submitted with the application. So the coal report here in terms of disused mines shafts and so on, in various areas with a red line in the middle there. And then from the baseline ecological survey as well, in terms of the site boundary and the kind of growth there is on the site in terms of scrubland and other tree growth. And then these are some photographs from that were submitted by the appellant with the information they submitted. So you can see the bottom left there is the access off the road into the site, a slightly elevated view into the site on the top left there, and then again on the right hand side, again a more elevated image which shows what would effectively be the front of the site as it fronts the road and the access point into the site. And then these are some more current photographs taken more recently. So the location of the bungalow, which is the reference point in the application title. This is looking towards the west, towards Belair, Flordal and Kelty. And then this is as you move round to start to look at the site, where the arrow indicates the location of the development within the site. And then this is looking east now towards Lahore and the Meadows Park. Again, the arrow indicates the development would be behind the growth there that is located along the roadside. Those couple of boulders indicate the proposed access point into the development. And then just one, again, kind of showing that access point and where the development would be located behind. And then this is a slightly closer image of the access into the site and the vegetation there. And then again, this is just to show the road that exists towards Lahore. And then this is the opposite side of the road across the fields towards Kelty. So the appeal site is on land that was previously part of Benarty Colliery and was previously mined for coal. The proposal includes an indicative layout of 5 dwellings set in a courtyard arrangement. The site is out with any settlement boundary within the countryside. A previous appeal was unanimously dismissed by the LRB in March 2023 as it was considered to be contrary to LDP Policy 19, Housing in the Countryside, as although the site was considered to be brownfield, an appropriate contaminated land and investigation plan had not been provided. Policy 9, brownfield, vacant and derelict land and empty buildings of MPF 4, as it had not been demonstrated that the land could not be made safe and suitable for the development, and Policy 23, health and safety, because of the harm which the application could create for the proposed and the neighbouring residents. The LRB noted the significant risks and concerns about the proposal intimated in the Scottish Coal Authority's responses. In addition, the LRB considered that the proposal was in breach of contaminated land policies with regard to the use of unstable land, as it had not been demonstrated that the site was sufficiently safe and stable for the development to proceed. While some concern was noted in relation to the adequacy of the access to the site, this was not a reason given for dismissing the appeal. This proposal is a resubmission with additional supporting information, including a Phase 1 site investigation, coal mining risk assessment and preliminary ecological survey. The road which is used to access the site is a narrow private single track road which is used to access Lahore Meadows Country Park, a major recreational facility in the area. The site is 50 metres west of the park. The site is also within the Loch Leven and Lomond Hills local landscape area. The reasons for refusal are firstly that the proposal is contrary to Policy 17A, Rural Homes of MPF 4. The site is in the open countryside detached from other residential property, and residential development of the site would not be in keeping with the character of the area. It has also not been demonstrated as required by Policy 17A that the land would not return to a natural state or will not happen without intervention. The proposal is also contrary to Policy 17B, as the proposal has not considered how the development will contribute towards local living and take into account identified local housing needs, including affordable housing, economic considerations and the transport needs of the development as appropriate for the rural location. Secondly, the proposal is contrary to Policy 9C of MPF 4 in that the applicant has not demonstrated that the land is or can be made safe and suitable for the proposed new use. Thirdly, the proposal is contrary to Policy 23, Health and Safety of MPF 4, in that sufficient evidence has been presented to demonstrate the development of the site for housing would be achievable and would not have a significant adverse effect on the health of future residents and existing local residents. Fourthly, the proposal is contrary to Policy 19, Housing in the Countryside of the Local Development Plan, and the associated Housing in the Countryside Supplementary Guidance. Insufficient evidence has been presented to assess the extent and severity of any contamination present on the site and whether this requires to be remediated. It has also not been demonstrated that if remediation is required, that housing is the only viable option for remediating the site. In addition, no consideration has been given to alternative uses for the site as required by LDP Policy 19. And finally, the proposal is contrary to Policy 58B, unstable land of the LDP, as it has not been demonstrated that the site and adjacent land is or can be made safe and stable for the proposed development. In terms of the assessment by the Planning Service, it's noted that in principle, as the site is on land that has been previously mined for coal, it meets the definition of brownfield land in NPF 4 and LDP 2, which is land which has previously been developed, and the term may cover vacant or derelict land, land occupied by redundant or unused buildings. NPF 4 Policy 17 with regard to rural homes is to encourage, promote and facilitate the delivery of more high quality, affordable and sustainable homes in the right locations. It sets out 8 criteria for the development of suitably scaled, sited and designed development that is in keeping with the character of the area. The only relevant criterion for this proposal is number 2, which gives support to proposals that reuse brownfield land where a return to a natural state has or will not happen without intervention. However, the site is well vegetated and it has not been sufficiently demonstrated that the land requires intervention to return to a natural state. LDP Policy 19 and the associated supplementary guidance under Category 6 allows small-scale housing proposals on cleared sites which have been significantly degraded by a former use or activity and which require to be remediated as the contamination present is a significant risk to human health or the wider environment, and B, that the redevelopment of a site where housing is the only means by which it is viable to remediate the site. The Phase 1 Contamination Investigation Report states that for risk to exist, there has to be a contamination source, a receptor, and a linkage between them. The initial risk assessment identifies several moderate risk sources with a likely probability and medium to severe consequence. Contaminated land officers were consulted to determine whether the site is so degraded as to require remediation. Whilst the applicant's view that the site is contaminated and requires remediation was initially accepted, this is not the view of the contaminated land officers, who note that although there is the possibility that contamination may be present in the soils, there is no evidence of this in the absence of a full ground investigation and soil analysis. Therefore, it cannot be said at this stage that the site is contaminated to the extent that a residential development is the only means of remediating the site. In addition, prior to permitting a rural brownfield site to be redeveloped for housing, it must be demonstrated that there are no other pressing requirements for the site, such as business or tourism, and this has not been provided. NPF 4 Policy 9 also notes that in determining whether the reuse is sustainable, the biodiversity value of brownfield land, which has naturalised, should be taken into account. In this instance, there are little or no signs of the previous development of the land, and the land has returned to a natural state physically and visually. NPF 4 Policy 23, Health and Safety, considers adverse effects on the health of the future residents of the development and existing neighbouring residents. In this case, the primary concern with former mining land is with potential ground gas ingress into future buildings, and further investigations are required to satisfy this. The application site falls within the Coal Authority's defined development high-risk area, as there is evidence of former mining operations within the site. In particular, features present at surface or shallow depths could include coal seams that have been worked by open cast methods, as well as a possible mine entry along the northern boundary of the site. Building over the top of or in close proximity to mine entries should be avoided wherever possible, as these features present a significant risk to public safety and surface stability for the proposed development. Although the Coal Authority has no objection subject to conditions which would be applied to secure further assessment and mitigation, the submitted coal mining risk assessment report identifies that currently there is a medium to high risk to the proposed development from former coal mining activity. Intrusive site investigations are therefore required in order to confirm the presence or otherwise of the position of the shallow coal mine workings and mine entry, as well as an engineering assessment and investigations aimed at deriving solutions to safely develop the land. In terms of placemaking, the site is relatively isolated, with clear separation from a nearby grouping on Benarty Road to the west, and this would be considered to be at odds with the local character and introduce a sporadic form of development into the locale, when a preference would be to direct development towards more sustainable locations. As there is no reason for refusal on landscape impact, any detailed proposal would need to be accompanied by a landscape impact assessment. Transportation and Development Officers have highlighted a number of areas where further information relating to access and transport is required. including further details on the predicted trip generation from the development and how it will be distributed on the surrounding transport network, along with mitigation for any adverse impacts, including the design and location of passing places and footways, and measures to encourage sustainable travel mode choice, including public transport and the school bus service. More information is also required with regard to visibility displays and access specification, as well as parking provision, internal site layout, including footpaths that connect to bus stops, turning facilities, roads adoption, waste collection, drainage, and street lighting. The baseline ecological evaluation of the site describes the site as containing dense scrub and young trees. The biodiversity officer notes that the site is shown as woodland on the council's GIS system. The development is therefore not considered to be compliant with NPF4, which seeks to retain existing trees and woodland resources. In terms of the applicant's case, it's that the proposal is in line with policy 17A of NPF4 in that it reuses brownfield land where a return to a natural state has not or will not happen without intervention. There is undoubtedly a clearing on the site which has remained with the same unnatural delineation, i.e. straight lines. The slag heap site investigation report and coal report show that the site is contaminated and shall not return to a natural state without intervention. The Phase 1 report shows there is evidence of former mining operations on the site, and it therefore meets the definition of brownfield land, which shall have to be remediated and made safe and suitable. A Phase 2 investigation at the permission in principle stage would be too costly at this stage. The Coal Authority do not object, subject to further information being provided. The contamination report states that ground is significantly degraded relative to agricultural land. The ecological report states that habitat restoration post-mining is often of limited success, as organic matter and moisture retention, as well as the microflora or the spoil, are not appropriately restored to allow vegetative regeneration, which is reflected in the baseline habitats and species identified. The policy officer has accepted that the site is brownfield and requires to be remediated. The environmental specialists who carried out the Stage 1 investigation and report have commented that this largely already covers the extent of contamination and that the site is of moderate to high risk of contamination and ground gas issues, and that based on their experience, there may or could be a risk of harm to human end users and buildings. The applicant would be happy to accept a condition to the effect that if no contamination was found after a further study is carried out that required to be remediated, that the site cannot then be developed. In this regard, I would probably just advise you that I don't think that would be reasonable in this case, because ultimately the development must be acceptable in principle. NPF4 does not require any justification for any other development other than housing. The tourism market in particular is well catered for in this area, and it's noted that there is also a housing emergency. In terms of other matters, there are 3 objections with regard to road safety, increase in traffic risk to pedestrians, cyclists and horses along the access road, impact on wildlife and biodiversity, light pollution, environmental study is inadequate and undertaken at a suboptimal time of year. The risk from old mine workings is not sufficiently mitigated, and particularly possible risk of explosive gases, a lack of economic benefit, and it would be a dormitory for Edinburgh. It would be a more piecemeal development without an overall plan and would extend development beyond the natural boundary of the old railway embankment, and it would set a precedent for further development. Perth and Kinross Heritage Trust advised that the development is unlikely to impact on any built heritage of conservation importance. And finally, obviously, if there was to be support, developer obligations are required for the development. Thank you.
Thank you for that. We'll move on to questions. I'll have one. It comes back to this question of the site itself. I suppose to sum it up, is nature taking it back? I suppose the best way to sum it is it becoming a greenfield site rather than a brownfield site. Is nature taking back over again?
Thank you, convener. I mean, ultimately, on the basis of the information that's been submitted, it is up to yourselves to decide whether you think that is the case. I mean, I think as you see in the photographs, there's obviously a lot of new growth at the site. with the passing of time. You for instance, you can't just walk onto the site from the main road. It's not clear, it's not open, it is quite overgrown. So, but the decision about the status of the site is for you to make.
Councillor Waters, any questions?
Thank you, convener. Just taking that a wee bit further. What is the classification for a brownfield site? I mean, obviously at one point this was, historical records say it is a brownfield site, and the papers certainly give a real correlation between the contamination of the land and a link to brownfield site. Is that a proper kind of, from a planning perspective, legal link, or is there a subjectivity in it?
I think in my presentation, Councillor, I did refer to the definition of brownfield. So land which has previously been developed. The term may cover vacant or derelict land, land occupied by redundant or unused buildings, and developed land within the settlement boundary where further intensification of use is considered acceptable. I suppose what has changed, if you like, in the last couple of years is that NPF4 is a bit more specific about naturalisation, and the crossover between brownfield and greenfield. So I mean, again, it's really for you to decide whether there's what status that bit of ground has. I think in the report that's been carried out by the planning service, there seems to be an acceptance that it's brownfield, but then equally there are other officers and other comments within the report saying that it's that it has yes, it's naturalised to the point of it now being green and not brown. Does that?
Thank you. Just a further question. You mentioned the medium to high risk from the coal workings or coal mining on the land, and there was a chart later on in the report that highlighted two high risk areas. One was the open cast mining, and then there was the mine entry, which there's I think suspected to be just along the northern boundary of the application. They were both highlighted as high risk for the application. Is there anything further or any advice further on that from the planning, legally the planning, in relation to the advice that's been given there that they both set high risk?
I think you probably have to look at the response from the Coal Authority. In the first instance, their response is, that's subject to further details. It may be possible to develop the site on the basis of the kind of initial assessment that's been done, but the planning service are less comfortable that there's enough information there to be sure that it is safe for development.
Given this is an in principle application, and there seems to be a need to, often when you get an in principle application, that kind of determines the principle that you can't develop on this. And given the fact that there's so much information here, that means that you maybe couldn't develop on this land, depending on the contamination and the other risk factors that are clearly highly that are documented within the report. trying to determine the risk going forward. That if you give an in principle and one of these come out, what you know it's not developable because of the contamination or because of these risk factors that are identified but not fully clarified. I think, which I think is what the officers are saying. There's a need to go back and get a lot more information before you can make them principle. Just trying to understand the risk between giving that in principle, given that you don't have all the information there, and what the consequences for that could be.
Okay, I'll try and answer. Yes, it's an application made in principle. So generally speaking, that is simply the principle of development. Is it in principle acceptable to develop this site? And I suppose if you stripped it back to the very bare minimum, that would be development in the countryside. Is it brownfield? Is it greenfield to start with? If you stripped it right back, because that's all you're considering is the principle of development. But that's not to say that under an application for planning permission in principle, you wouldn't consider all the other matters that would make development on the site acceptable and safe. So, you know, yes, a further matter specified in condition application could give you that further information, or indeed an application from full planning permission right from the start. But, you know, we have a planning permission in principle here. The applicant has gone away since the application was last discussed, and they have provided the first level, I suppose, of investigation required in terms of the contamination and the coal and ecological baseline. But there's still some concerns that isn't going into enough detail. Now, you could argue that, well, it is only a planning permission in principle, and why should you have to go to that level of detail? But at the end of the day, if the development is acceptable in principle, it also has to be acceptable in all other regards, would be my advice. I won't offer a comment on the acceptability or otherwise of the reports that have been submitted and whether those are sufficient. The view of the planning service is that they're not, that more invasive studies need to be done, not just the very basic desktop assessments, if you like, but actually assessments that are more invasive into the ground.
Thank you.
Councillor Harvey.
Well, I did have a good question, but Councillor Waters nicked it from me, and you answered it, so I'm just going to pass. Thank you.
Thank you, members. So can we now proceed to determine the application for review on the basis of the information before us? That is the information contained within the papers and the presentation by the planning advisor, or do we need more information? Councillor Waters?
Happy to proceed.
Councillor Harvey?
Happy to proceed.
I'm happy to proceed on this one. So I'll start us off. This came before us, as we heard, in 2023. And at the time I was very cautious of it and did actually refuse the appeal. We now have a phase 1 report before us, which talks of medium to high risk for various factors, mine entrance, shallow mining, mine gas. The Coal Authority report has come back saying they accept that and also talk about medium to high risk. And obviously our own planners say that a more intrusive investigation is required. We know that's going to be expensive because obviously we've got figures in front of us for the applicant, but that report's going to be necessary anyway. And given all the risks involved, gas and shallow mining, I would not be happy to approve this, even in principle, where there's a risk to the safety of people who might eventually live there. So I'm certainly inclined to refuse the appeal. However, Given the photographs and comments of the planning advisor, I am also wondering now whether, in fact, it does qualify as a brownfield site, given that nature appears to be reclaiming the land without any intervention. I'm wondering now whether it should be classed as greenfield, and therefore the reason for refusal. It doesn't satisfy 17A2 of NPF 4 because it is now becoming a natural ground again without any form of intervention. So to sum up, in my opinion, it is to refuse the appeal. I think there's a safety issue here, which we haven't had any demonstration that this can go ahead in any way to make it safe for people to live there. I'm happy with the comments and the reasons for refusal. I think perhaps we might have to make a slight amendment, Mr. McLeod, in number 1. And also there's an issue which hasn't been clarified, and that's of transportation and how it would be affected by these houses building there. But we'll leave those for the moment and see what my colleagues have to say. Councillor Waters.
Thank you to convener. I do concur with your view on this. I do feel that there needs to be a lot more information, especially over the safety and some of the elements raised within that. The brownfield greenfield site. I'm not sure what the implications of that are. So it would be good if you could get a bit more legal advice on what conditions would have to be in there if the determination is for a greenfield site, which I do agree it does look like it is more greenfield than brownfield site, and the brownfield was very much a historical element rather than the current state of the land. Thank you.
And Councillor Hub.
Yeah, thank you, convener. I would also concur with what both of you say, more than from my perspective on the greenfield brownfield argument. I was been at the site and it does look much more greenfields, although that clarification is required. Not so bothered about the contamination or health and safety issues. I think a further survey would confirm or not those issues, which would be required anyway. But yeah, I back up you two in refusing the.
Thank you for that. So, Mr. McLeod, we have a unanimous decision to refuse, but there seems to be a little bit requirement for clarification, I think, on number 1 refusal, because I think we're now of the opinion that it's a greenfield site now, so it doesn't comply with NPF 4 policy 17A2. Therefore, there's no remedial method necessary because nature is claiming it. So we're going to need some advice from you on how we reword this, I think.
I think in that respect, if you are of the view that it is a greenfield site, arguably it has been demonstrated that the land has effectively returned to a natural state without any intervention. So I think that could certainly be amended to reflect that. And then whether the secondary reason for refusal within reason 1 could potentially be put to a secondary reason. So the primary number 1 reason could deal with the determination that it does appear to be greenfield rather than brownfield, and then the sentence commencing the proposal is contrary to 17B could perhaps be moved to a secondary reason for refusal. So whether it is just the case that we will amend it to it has not been demonstrated that the ground is brownfield and that the land has returned to a natural state under the terms of policy 17A of NPF 4.
Yeah. So effectively, we'll make that where it starts. The proposal is contrary to 17B. That would effectively be what reason for refusal number 2, and then we just ship the other ones back, each one back. My colleagues, are we both happy with that? Yeah. Yeah, we're happy with that. So that's unanimous on that as well. Then thank you very much. Okay, we'll now move on to item 4.2, which is the erection of a dwelling house in principle again. Land 40 metres west of 8 Langley Place in Perth. We have members of the audience. Is there anybody here of interest in that one? Thank you very much. Are you all objectors or are you supporters? Okay, fine, thank you. Okay, Mrs. Tierney, if you could introduce the case for us.
Thank you, convener. So we'll just run the presentation through first. This is the location of the appeal site where the yellow star is. So obviously in the Canoe Hill area of the city, just to the south of Muir Hall Road. And as we zoom in, you can see where Muir Hall Road runs along the top there. And the application site is where the yellow star is. And as we zoom in again, you can see the exact location of that. Again, Muir Hall Road to the north and Mount Tabor Road to the south, leading up to the application appeal site. This is the red line application site boundary. Obviously, the area denoted in red here. The blue is the other land in the ownership of the applicant. And then as we look more closely at the indicative site plan here, again, this is an application in principle, so this is indicative. We can see the red line application boundary and the hatched blue area is the other land in the ownership of the applicant. I think there's a slightly closer one. Yeah, so this one shows the access which is proposed off Mount Tabor Road into the application site, and you can see surrounding residential properties, Geen Tree Cottage to the west there, and a couple of houses off Langley Place to the east. This is an extract from the local development plan. So this is the settlement plan, which shows the location of the site with the yellow star there. So when you zoom in on the right-hand side, we can see the location of that within the green area, which is protected areas of open space within the local plan settlement boundary. There's some photographs. So this is as you travel along Muir Hall Road. The other land in the ownership of the applicant is the green space you see at the front of the road bordering Muir Hall Road here, with the application site uphill towards Mount Tabor Road where the yellow arrow is. And then this is just a couple of images looking in the opposite direction, effectively looking back towards the west along Muir Hall Road. And then this is as you move in the opposite direction, looking back towards the application site, up across the field there to the top of the hill. And just as a point of reference, Geen Tree Cottage on the right hand side, and you can possibly just make out the houses on Langley Place on the opposite side of that image. Then this is on the left, Mount Tabor Road. So as you move up towards the application site, this is the road. The wall on the left there is the wall of Geen Tree Cottage, and the right hand image is looking back down from the application site, looking down Mount Tabor Road again with Geen Tree Cottage, this time on the right hand side, or the boundary wall of it. And then this is as you move in towards the access point into the appeal site. So the gate that you see there is into Geen Tree Cottage. And probably what I should have said with the site drawing is that this area of ground here is in the ownership of the applicant, and the owners of Geen Tree Cottage have a right of access through to their property over it. The image on the right is taken from the boundary, within the boundary of Geen Tree Cottage, looking towards the appeal site. And as you can see, there's some trees on the boundary at that point. Then this is this area of ground here where the couple of cars are parked. That is in the ownership of the appellant. The arrow indicates the approximate location of the point of access into the site where the house would be located. And then as you continue round looking up Mount Tabor Road again, you'll see where it stops being accessible by traffic and turns into just a pedestrian only route. And then this is now from further up that pedestrian route, looking back down towards Geen Cottage on the and the appeal site on the right hand side, and the one on the left is the appeal site in behind there. Now this is a view across where the house would be located. So an open area of field, paddock, with the existing, there's an existing shed or horse shelter within the site, and then the couple of houses at Langley Place to the east. And then this is an image of, there's a ditch that runs down the Mount Tabor Road, which is referred to in some of the representations. The appeal site concerns an area of ground within the settlement boundary, which, while within a residential area, is also protected as open space. The area of open space includes other ground not in the ownership of the applicant, and there's also Millennium Park to the west. But this part of it is within the ownership of the applicant, and it stretches from Muirhall Road to the north to Mount Tabor Road to the south. While the park to the west is a more formal area of open space, this area of ground has been used as a paddock for a number of years. The application site is a smaller parcel of ground accessed only from Mount Tabor Road to the east of Geen Tree Cottage, which is listed building, and to the west of dwelling houses at Langley Place, accessed from Langley Drive off Muirhall Road. The access into the site would be taken by driving east along Mount Tabor Road as far as vehicles can drive before it turns into a pedestrian-only route leading to Langley Drive. The applicant owns an area of ground where the access into the site would be taken from and over which the owners of Geen Tree Cottage have a right of access. The boundaries of the wider area contain various trees and foliage, including at the point of access into the site. The applicant is offering to create biodiversity improvements across the remaining land in their ownership, stretching down to Muirhall Road. The reasons for refusal are firstly that the proposal would result in the loss of an area of existing open space as identified as such within the adopted Perth and Kinross Local Development Plan 2. The proposal is therefore contrary to Policy 14A, existing areas of open space of the adopted Local Development Plan, as the development does not meet any of the exceptions cited within the policy and would ultimately result in the loss of an area of land which has been identified for retention by the Council as open space. In addition to this, if approved, that decision may be cited by others as setting an undesirable precedent, undermining the objectives of the Council and leading to the further erosion of open space in both this area and others. Secondly, the proposal would result in the loss of an area of existing open space which has been identified by the Council as being of visual amenity value and worthy of retention. The proposal is therefore contrary to Policy 1, placemaking of the adopted Local Development Plan, as the proposed development would adversely affect the character of the surrounding area by losing existing open space which currently contributes positively to the area. And thirdly, it has not been demonstrated that the proposed means of access to the site is safe for both pedestrians and other road users. The proposal is therefore contrary to Policy 60, Transport Standards of the LDP, which looks to ensure that all road-related matters are in accordance with both local and national design and safety standards. So in terms of the assessment by the Planning Service, it's acknowledged that while the site is essentially surrounded on all sides by housing, and in principle the development of a house would not conflict with that the site is protected open space within the LDP. Part B of Policy 14A is most relevant and states that one of the exceptions allowing for development is where it involves a minor part of the site and would not affect its continued use as a recreational or amenity resource. It is considered that the amount of ground proposed for the development is more than minor. While the ground is in private ownership and does not have a functional use, it has a visual quality and a feeling of openness. It is acknowledged that when looked at in detail, a suitable and acceptable design solution for a house can be found, which would also not impact on neighbouring residential amenity. In terms of roads and access, Mount Tabor Road is an adopted road and recognised core path and right of way. The access to the site is already used for access to Geen Tree Cottage. The Transportation and Development team have commented that there is still perhaps insufficient detail around the vehicular access into the site, how pedestrians in the area will be catered for, and if minimum requirements for emergency access can also be catered for. And turning to the applicant's case, they state that a larger area of open space would be retained and enhanced, and the planning officer has taken a narrow view of the impact of the development. While the site boundary measures 20% of the overall area of open space, the footprint of the house and driveway is nearer 5%, with the rest being garden. It is questionable what the visual impact is, as it is not visible from Mount Tabor Road. Access to Geen Tree Cottage will remain, and the proposed access only utilises a small area to gain access to the site. Mount Tabor Road is adopted and maintained by the council. A width of 3.7 metres is required for emergency vehicles, and this width exists. Pedestrian access is not affected. The site can be serviced with mains drainage and water and other utilities, and a modern and efficient house would enhance the visual amenity of the area. In terms of other comments, the Community Council has commented that it considers the site as suitable for a single house, but only accessed from Mount Tabor Road and not Muirhall Road, but that because the road is very narrow, it is not suitable for vehicles like bin lorries. Construction traffic must take into account the use of the route by pedestrians, including school children. There are 5 letters of objection, and points made include that the area has been protected for over 25 years as an important area of open space within the Canoe Hill area. The area acts as a green corridor linking the lower spaces to the woods on Canoe Hill. The semi-rural character of the area would become suburbanised. The open space designation assists in protecting the setting of Geen Cottage, which is a B-listed building. The proposed access would result in a loss of trees and hedging, which are important habitat, and no surveys have been carried out to determine any such impact. The area acts as a natural habitat for biodiversity. Despite previous applications, these have all been refused to protect this natural area. Extra cars using this route will be dangerous for cyclists and walkers, including children. Previous applications have been refused, including an appeal rejected by the Scottish Government due to the sensitivity of the site, impact on the open space network, rural character of the area, and the setting of Geen Tree Cottage. The access to the site, which is also to Geen Tree Cottage, is unable to support additional vehicular traffic, and the narrow nature of the access is already narrow between the boundary wall of Geen Tree Cottage and a ditch on the other side. The applicant is proposing to plant native trees and flowers elsewhere on their land. However, the area is already rich in ecology, and this should be preserved first and foremost, including tawny owls, red squirrels, foxes, frogs, bats, rabbits, hedgehogs, and birds. Other consultations to note include developer obligations would be required for primary education and transport infrastructure. The Conservation Officer notes that Geen Tree Cottage is a listed building, but that there should be no harmful impact on the setting of the property. A condition would be required to ensure the listed boundary wall of the property, which bounds Mount Tabor Road, is protected from damage during construction. I just thought I would maybe just comment on that in particular, because I don't really think, again, if it was to be approved, that would be a suitable or reasonable condition, because essentially it would be a legal and civil matter to address with the owners of the property if that were to happen. The wall itself is also listed, but if it were damaged in any way, it would hopefully be likely that any repairs would be classed as repair and maintenance and not require, a formal application as such. The other thing I was going to point out is that while the reasons for refusal in terms of open space are based on the local development plan, there is an applicable NPF4 policy, which is Policy 20 Blue and Green Infrastructure. This states that development proposals that result in fragmentation or net loss of existing blue and green infrastructure will only be supported where it can be demonstrated that the proposal would not result in or exacerbate a deficit in blue or green infrastructure provision, and the overall integrity of the network will be maintained, and that the planning authority's open space strategy should inform this. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Councillor Waters.
Thank you, convener. Just the NPF 20, the blue-green infrastructure that you mentioned at the end. You mentioned that decisions should be informed by the open space council's open space strategy. Do we have any information on what the strategy is?
Thank you, councillor. So the information I have is that the council does have its own open space team, if you like, or team of officers who look at and are responsible for council-owned and other large areas of open space. They carry out audits of those as well. There probably is something, I understand there's something that the policy team do use to inform decisions about designations of open space. I'm not aware of, I haven't seen the strategy, if you like, but the planning authority will have information about the open space and the designation, and it's certainly something that, because it's allocated or protected in the local development plan and has been for a number of years, there will be a basis for which those allocations and designations have been made, but you would probably need to consult with the policy team to get more information on exactly what that is and how those assessments and designations are made.
Thank you.
Councillor Harvey.
I've got a couple of questions. Thanks, convener. I've got a couple of questions. One related to Councillor Waters' question relating to the allocation of this area. Some of the complainants' comments referred to it as being a green area running through to the Canoe Hill. Would that statement, would you find details of that in that statement of why it was allocated as a space you couldn't develop on? So
I don't know, councillor. It's possible that that's one of the reasons. It's clearly, it's clearly a green. The policy 20 is about corridors or routes, and there's a link there. But whether that specific link is one of the particular reasons, I think you'd need to speak to them and find that out.
Yeah, as I said, it's not clear to me. It's a link. My question was main question was to do with something else. You noted about the road access that maybe needs a bit more work. As also, I noticed there was no tree or ecology studies or such like. Would that, if we did say, for example, if we did accept this, would that be something we could condition?
I would suggest not. Just because it's not something that's been picked up necessarily or is a reason for refusal. I think if you did concur that there was a lack of information with regard to certainly trees, the access point into the site is covered in trees, and there's not really a detailed tree survey or the impact on ecology associated with that. The roads department have said there is a need for more information about access, pedestrian use, the width. The applicant saying it is all acceptable, but there's no real hard evidence that that's the case. So I would guard against conditions for those things. I think it's really something that you'd need to further investigate.
Okay, thanks. That's me.
Thank you. Just one question. In the report of handling, we have a paragraph, pre-application consultation, and it talks about the fact that the planners at the time recommended that the applicant look at changing the designation if this is an open space. It actually says recommended a better way forward for the applicant, as opposed to a planning application, would be to make formal representations to the LDP team in relation to the open space designation. Now, my question, would that be to the current LDP2? In other words, they would make a formal representation to our team now to change in the LDP2, or would they have to wait till the LDP3 comes out, which obviously is much longer waiting time?
Yeah, convener, thank you. So the current local plan that designates it as open space is that set in stone. The advice going forward is that they should engage with the LDP team with regard to the next local plan. So I don't know the exact timescales, but on the basis the current local plan is a few years old, we're not far off. Probably a couple of years away yet from the adoption of the next plan, but they will be in the consultative stage right now, I would imagine, looking for bids for sites or changes in policy and things. So, the pre-app advice is absolutely right, that on the basis that it's allocated open space right now, rather than applying or approving a development now on an ad hoc basis, the best route would be to engage with the LDP team to see whether there's some scope for amending the open space designation in some way, which kind of comes back to the open space strategy and the information they might have about why it was protected in the first place. And the applicant can then put forward reasons why they think that shouldn't apply to this site or the whole area of ground indeed. But I think in terms of timing, it's a good time to do that.
Okay, members, thank you very much for that. I have no further questions. So members, can we proceed to determine the application for review on the basis of the information before us, that is the information contained within the papers and the presentation by the planning advisor, or do we need more information? Councillor Waters?
On this one, I would like to go for a deferment. I feel trying to understand the open space and having a good look at various open spaces throughout Perth. I would like to understand a lot more about it. And most open spaces seem to have an access type to get into them. This is clearly defined as a visual amenity. Given NPF 4 policy 20 and the need to kind of consult with the potential fragmentation of these sites that should be in line with the open space strategy. I feel it would be I feel it's important that looking at this application, we do it understanding what that strategy is, which we haven't seen in the papers. So I would like to go for a deferment to allow officers to respond to that, and for the applicant to be able to reply to that as well, and to do that. And while I accept that LDP 2.3 may be a route that potentially to look at more detail, we have this application before us, and I think it's important that we do give it full consideration, and as such I would ask for a deferment at this stage.
Thank you very much for that. It is normal procedure, just for members of the public here, that when one member asks for a deferment, it effectively means he hasn't got enough information to make a decision, and it's normal policy for us to accept that we go for a deferment to get that more information, because it will be unfair if one or more of us can go ahead and one can't. So we have to go for a deferment, even though it's just one of us asked. But I will ask, as a matter of policy, Councillor Harvey, what's your thoughts on it?
Yeah, for slightly different reasons to Councillor Waters. Yeah, I feel that if this was in a smaller village or town, we wouldn't have any problem accepting it. But there is a bit of kind of grey area, so I'd like to find out more information as to why this is classified as this kind of zone. So yeah, I'm happy to go with the deferment.
Okay, fine. Thank you very much. I'm happy to follow suit. So, Mr. McLeod, looks like we're going for a deferment on this. I know Mr. Tony mentioned about tree and ecological reports. Do we need to ask for that? Because there was one question of whether it could be done as a condition. I'm not sure.
Would it, I think the transport side as well, would it be reasonable at this stage to ask the applicant to go to that level, or and this doesn't prejudge any decision that would be happening at a future committee.
I think if that is the committee's view that they require more information in respect of the transport assessment, I think it would be sensible for the applicant to provide that as additional information. And in respect of the tree plan as well, I think that would be sensible if the applicant's able to provide that. And that's obviously subject to the additional information in respect of the detail for the open space strategy as well. So no, I think that would be appropriate to for that to be provided at a later stage.
So the process is for the applicant to provide that, then that goes to development management for comment, and then back to the applicant for their response. Is that the procedure?
Yes, convener. The deferral at this stage would be to allow the policy team to comment on the open space element in as far as NPF4 and the open space strategy, and to provide information about why the site is designated open space and any up-to-date information there is about that. And then the appellant will have the opportunity to comment on that as well. Because there's discussion about the lack of information about the intensification of use of the access and the physical acceptability of that access, and a lack of information on trees, that information should be provided. That should be part of the deferral, that information is provided by the applicant, and further consultation will take place on that with the council's roads officers and the environment staff within the planning service as well. And then it will return back to a later meeting. So
Mr. McLeod, I think that in fact we're deferring it, obviously. Obviously a written confirmation will go to the applicant listing what they've got to do. Yeah.
Thank you, convener.
Okay. Thank you. So this one's been deferred to a future meeting, providing certain information comes through. Okay. So thank you for that. We'll now move on to the third item on the agenda. This is item 4.3, which is the erection of a dwelling house land 55 metres southeast of Ashley Middlebank Farm in Errol. Do we have anybody with us for that one at all? No. Okay. So, Mrs. Journey, if you could introduce this one for us.
thank you, convener. So the application is appeal site location shown here with the yellow star. So we're at just north of Errol there, beside the A90 between Dundee and Perth, just on the east side there. And then as we zoom in, you'll start to see some familiar landmarks like Perthshire Caravans, for example, and the golf driving range at Middlebank, which is next to the appeal site where the yellow star is. And then as we zoom in, the site is within the strip of ground there beside the trees within the yellow circle. Then some drawings submitted with the application. So this is the red line application site plan, which shows the access points both off the A90 and to the south when exiting the site, and the red square around the application site itself where the house would be located. And then zooming in on the site plan, which shows the access into the site and the location of the house towards the western boundary. This is an application for full planning permission, so we do have the full house details. That drawing there shows greenery around the boundaries of the site. Doesn't delineate clearly the existing tree belt to the rear, which we'll come on to. This is just for reference. The appeal site is where the yellow star is, down in the bottom left-hand corner, but the appellant also owns other land in blue. And this was a a planning application for a vehicle repair and servicing business, which was refused, hasn't been appealed. And then these are the elevations and floor plans of the proposed dwelling house. And some images of the site. So this is as you head towards Perth, you can see the line of trees, and the house would be located to the front of it there, just so you can understand where it is. Then this is the site itself. So as you can see, the line of kind of poplar trees at the back, and the access road in front of the site. And then some more images. So the site itself on the left, where the yellow arrow is, that's the corner of the site. You can see some new kind of fencing and hedge planting that's gone on. Couple of dwelling houses to the rear there, two dwelling houses. And then on the right-hand image, kind of agricultural storage building as well on the opposite side from the site. And then this is from further down the road, looking back towards the A90. So the site itself within that yellow square area. And then this is the edge of the site, and that is the Middlebank golf driving range in the rear there, and the buildings associated with that. And then this is from the north side of the site looking south on the left-hand side, and then a slightly closer image of, you can see where the fencing is, and that delineates the site boundary or the ground in the ownership of the applicant, and that line of poplar trees immediately behind it. And then some other images of the appeal site, so you can see the kind of open grassed area contained with fencing, access gates into both fields. And then this is just the field to the south, out with the application site on the left, and then ground on the other side of the road, so you can see the kind of surrounding landscape. And then just some more images of the kind of general locality and some of the improvements that have been made to fencing and gates and so on by the applicant. Of the A90 trunk road from a shared private access road. A line of prominent poplar trees visible from the A90 is located to the immediate west of the site, and these are not in the ownership of the applicant. The ground and landscape is otherwise flat, open and agricultural in nature, as is the ground to which this application relates. The site is a parcel of ground towards the northern end of the applicant's ownership, nearest to the driving range, and two other dwelling houses located on either side of the access road to the driving range. The ground and other ground in the ownership of the applicant have been surrounded in new post and wire fencing and planting. The area of ground which is the subject of this application has been clearly delineated by fencing and planting, and a former agricultural building is located on the opposite side of the access road. A separate application was submitted by the applicant in the field to the northeast for a vehicle service and repair workshop, formation of hard standing and associated works. This was refused by the Planning Service on the 19th of December 2024, and the application, which is the subject of this appeal, was refused on the 18th of December 2024. No appeal has been submitted for the other refusal. It was refused for 7 reasons, including the greenfield nature of the site, agricultural land classification, impact on the built and natural environment, no need demonstrated in terms of either diversification of an existing business or relating to a site-specific resource or opportunity, an unsustainable location for access to modes of sustainable transport, and a lack of information on ecology, habitats and trees. So the reasons for refusal here are that firstly, the proposals are contrary to MPF 4 policies 9, brownfield, vacant and derelict land and empty buildings, 17, rural homes, and Perth and Kinross LDP Policy 19, Housing in the Countryside, and associated supplementary guidance, as the development does not meet any of the relevant criteria which would enable support of a new residential unit within the countryside. Secondly, the proposals are contrary to NPF 4 Policy 14, Design Quality and Place, and the LDP Placemaking Policies 1A and 1B, Parts A, B, C, D and F, Policy 39 Landscape and associated supplementary guidance, as the proposals, by reason of tree removal, site location, juxtaposition and lack of cohesion with existing buildings and absence of any landscape containment, would not contribute positively to the quality of the surrounding area, resulting in adverse visual amenity and landscape impacts. And thirdly, the proposals are contrary to NPF 4 Policy 1, 3 and 5 and LDP 2 Policies 40A, 40B and 50, which seeks to protect prime agricultural land, trees, biodiversity and wildlife habitats, and requires a detailed tree and ecology survey to be undertaken in order to demonstrate the presence and any potential impacts on trees and protected species which may be contained within such habitats. No tree or ecology survey has been submitted with the application. In terms of the assessment by the Planning Service, permission may be granted for houses within building groups where the site extends the group into a readily definable site, defined as existing topography, roads or well-established landscape features such as a watercourse or mature tree belt. While there are buildings at Middlebank, the site is located away from these with intervening roads and land. While there was also an application for the vehicle service and repair workshop by the same applicant, the proposed house has not been submitted with any justification that it is in support of the business, but in any case the application was refused and there is no business nearby. The house would appear detached from the group and does not reflect the pattern of the existing buildings in the area. There are also concerns that the position of the house leaves little private garden area to the rear towards the poplar trees. There is also the potential for conflict with the driving range business to the rear, although there is no reason for refusal related to this. There's insufficient information about who owns the poplar trees or a survey which identifies them and which trees may be affected by the development, such that they may need to be removed due to the close proximity of the proposed house. And there's no information related to the prime nature of the agricultural ground. And in terms of the applicant's case, they state that the site complies with the Housing in the Countryside supplementary guidance for a number of reasons. Under the building groups category, the site is bound on 3 elevations by existing buildings. To the west, there is a golf driving range and reception building, cafeteria. To the northwest is a large industrial unit. Directly north, there are 2 residential dwellings, and to the east, a large commercial unit. The proposed dwelling sits within the gap between this building group, proposing not to extend the southerly boundary of the existing building group. The proposal in its shown location does not constitute ribbon development, and all the buildings mentioned are within 45 metres of the new dwelling. Under the infill category, the site is bound by buildings either side with a maximum distance of 72 metres between the existing built form. The building size proposed is not excessive and of a similar footprint to the existing residential properties. The plot size is equally comparable. The use of natural materials such as stone and large cladding under a natural slate roof will ensure the house sits respectfully within its surroundings, and the site occupies the extent of the gap. Under the economic activity category, the applicant owns a large area of land surrounding the site, which is used for agricultural purposes. In addition, his brother owns the neighbouring golf driving range and additional farmland, which both brothers actively work and operate as an existing business. Currently, the applicant is having to commute a significant distance to operate this business. It's further argued that the house will assist in enhancing the aesthetic of the building group. It is stated that the trees are out with root protection areas and are of a size that pose no risk to the development. The applicant has provided 3 letters detailing support for the proposal from another family member related to being able to support the nearby driving range, also in the family's ownership, but providing no further information about this. The 2 other letters are pro forma style from individuals who give no reasons why they think the application should be approved. In terms of other matters, developer obligations contributions are required. There are no objections from Transport Scotland. The 2 objections, one of the objectors has further commented on the appeal via a planning consultant, and this refers to the reasons why the proposal contravenes a number of development plan policies and to work which has been carried out at the site, including cutting back of trees, installation of gates and fencing, hardcore and new bush planting. And it also questions the motives of the applicant as far as the repair workshop application is concerned.
Thank you very much for that. I'll move to questions. Councillor Harvey.
Thank you, Convener. A couple of questions. First one's clarification. You mentioned about these trees, these popular trees, and the fact that nobody owns them and no tree survey has been carried out. Do we have any more information as to who owns them and what rules are around these trees as far as development goes? Thanks.
Oh, thank you, Councillor. It would appear from the other information that's been submitted with the application that it is the applicant's brother that owns the trees. They are out with the application site boundary, but that's not to say that any impact upon them should not be assessed as part of the planning application, because this is to do with the root protection area for the trees, and there are British standards which dictate the distance development should be away from the root protection area of the trees. So there's really not enough information about that with the application, notwithstanding the fact that the applicant doesn't own them. That shouldn't matter. They should still be assessed. I think, if I'm right, the most current up-to-date guidance in the British Standard is that the development should be at least 12 times the radius, 12 times the stem diameter for a single stem tree and 10 times the diameter for trees with more than one stem arising below 1.5 metres above ground level. So there needs to be an assessment of the width, if you like, the diameter of the tree, and then how far away the development really needs to be away from that. And we just don't know from what's been submitted how far away the house is.
Sorry, just to clarify, that was 12 times the stem diameter of the tree. Okay, right, okay. You've kind of answered my second question there as well, so I'll pass on. Thanks.
I'll just have one question. We're talking about a group here. My understanding, if you're extending a group, it has to be extended into a definable area. Is that correct?
Yes, Convener, I think you'd look if we look at the supplementary guidance category there.
Sorry, I haven't got my book with me, I'm afraid.
Right. So permission will be granted for houses within building groups, providing it can be demonstrated that it respects the scale, character and form of the existing building group and will be integrated into the existing layout and building pattern. New housing will not detract from the visual amenity of the group when viewed from the wider landscape, and a high standard of residential amenity will be provided for both existing and new housing. I don't.
No, it's just it's just I thought there was in the back of my mind there was about a group. An area has to be a definable area, an established boundary. I think that was the better wording. I think it's a compact building group. My colleague's telling me.
So permission may be granted subject to the above criteria that I just mentioned for houses which extend the group into a readily definable adjacent site, is the exact wording. This will be formed by existing topography, roads or well-established existing landscape features such as a watercourse or mature tree belt, which will provide a suitable setting.
Thank you for that, clarifying that. Thank you. Councillor Waters.
And my question was going to be on a similar lines, and it's really been answered. So thank you.
We have no further questions. Then members, can we proceed to determine the application for review on the basis of the information before us, that is, the information contained within the papers and the presentation by the planning advisor, or do we require more information? Councillor Harvey,
We've got enough information as far as I'm concerned.
Councillor Waters,
Happy to proceed.
and I'm happy to proceed. So Councillor Harvey, if you could start us on this one.
Yeah, thank you, convener. I'm going to go to uphold the refusal, basically on the grounds of the site location, juxtaposition, lack of cohesion with the building. The building is sitting on its own, quite a distance away from other buildings in a greenfield area. So that's my reason for upholding the refusal.
Thank you for that. I'll come in next if I may. I visited the site myself again. I don't think this is an infill site, to be honest. I don't think it's what would be my definition of an infill site. Is it a group? Well, it's a bit of a stretch. I think perhaps you might be able to say that, but as I just wanted to clarify, it needs to be going into a site which has an established boundary. There are boundaries on two sides, of course, but one part is just a wire fence with some new plantings there, which then therefore cannot be classed as established. Also, the actual land itself is prime agricultural land or classed that at this stage. So it's not really forming a group or extending a group. It's not an infill site. When you read through, there is, of course, the possibility of, according to supplementary guidance, an economic need, but that hasn't been established either. And normally that would be lending towards an agricultural business, although I believe NPF4 now talks of a rural business. But given that the applicant's other application for a business location nearby has also been refused, I don't feel that there is an economic need there at the moment. There's certainly no proof of it. So I feel, based on that, I would have to refuse the appeal as well. Councillor Waters.
I'm happy to concur with my two colleagues, and I think the detail you went into, Councillor Braun, convener, is more than adequate. Thank you.
So, Mr. McLeod, we have another unanimous one. I'm not sure whether you wanted to clarify refusal number one, reason refusal. It doesn't actually detail all the reasons why, the various points, like infill sites, groups, whatever. So whether you feel that needs to be clarified or you're happy with it as it is? Yeah, the infill site, yeah.
I think if the committee are persuaded in that respect, I think it would be worthwhile making more detailed reference in that particular reason, number one, in respect of the supplementary guidance. If the committee is of the view that it doesn't comply with either of any of those distinctions in respect of infill or a building group, I think we could simply make that particular reason one, or express that that's why on this occasion it's not compliant or not deemed to be compliant with policy 19 and the housing and in the countryside supplementary guidance. So whether it's worthwhile just including some additional wording, perhaps along the lines of the development doesn't comply with the supplementary guidance and the proposed exceptions thereof regarding infill sites, building groups, etc.
Yeah, I think so. I think it's my colleagues agree. We're not looking at a building group or an infill site. It's not brownfield, not replacing redundant buildings. As I say, it would only be section 3 of the supplementary guidance, which is economic activity, which is the only one really close to it, but that isn't improved either. So if we can perhaps word that in there, I think that would be ideal. If my colleagues are happy with that, yep, both are. Fine. Thank you very much. Oh, sorry, Ms. Tierney, sorry.
Can I just check, because I think we need to just be clear whether you A, think it's a group, B, that it's not a definable an appropriate addition to that group as well, because you mentioned there that you didn't think it was
I don't know. I don't think it's a group
in the first place.
No,
never mind extension to
no,
it. So
it's too stretched out. I think it's stretching the imagination there to make it a group, but I think the fact that it's not going to a definable area is the main point.
And the other thing you mentioned about agricultural land, because although that is referred to in reason for refusal 3,
Mhm.
reason for refusal 3 only specifically says there's no information with regard to trees and protected species, not that there's no assessment of prime agricultural land. So would you wish that added to condition, reason for refusal 3?
No, I think it's mentioned in there. It's against policy. I think that's enough. I think that'd be sufficient. We fine, Mr. McLeod, yeah?
Thanks, Convener.
Okay, fine. Okay. So we'll then move on to item 4.4, which is this is to do the subdivision of a dwelling house to form 2 dwelling houses and associated works at Acada House, Campmere, Blairgowrie. I think that Ginger Gem's here for that. Yeah. So, Mrs. Tierney, if you could introduce the case for us.
Thank you, Convener. So we'll just run through the presentation first. So location of the appeal site at Campmere there, small hamlet of housing to the east of Burrelton. And then zooming in on the main group of houses there and the appeal site on the North Road there, the top end of the group. And then to zoom in, this is the existing property, large detached house. This is the site plan that was submitted with the application. So the red line goes around the property boundary. And then an aerial image here denoted with the boundary of the application site. It obviously includes the subdivision of the whole property. So the red line goes around everything, but there is obviously proposed subdivision within that to create the split into 2 dwellings in terms of the access, which remains a single point of access, but also the parking within the grounds of the properties. This is the there's no images, there's no plans within the application of the existing floor plans of the whole property. All we have is the elevations and floor plans of the half of the property that the proposal would create the single unit, the separate 1-bed unit out of. So on the ground floor here, the garage that is as existing as part of the existing house, and then on the upper floor, the creation of the 1-bedroom dwelling house. And then this is a map which was submitted by the appellant, so the appeal site there with the yellow box, but it was submitted to show the mixture of sizes of properties within the grouping of houses at Campmere there. And then again, this is the red line of the planning application boundary. The blue is other land in the ownership. Sorry, the red is planning history associated with land in the ownership of the applicant. So you can see the house there on the right hand side. The red is other land in their ownership, which there was 1 house approved on that piece of ground. In May 2023, that permission remains extant, so there is permission there for 1 house. 2 houses were applied for, and that was refused in January 2024. The other shaded blue area is other land in their ownership for information. And then some photographs. So this is the existing access to the existing dwelling house, which would be the access to the proposed subdivided house into 2. Then this is the junction of the access in both directions, south and north. And then as you come up the driveway into the driveway of the existing property, some fencing and trees, and then you can see the house there ahead. Image on the left is the front of the house. So the piece of ground in front there is where there is permission for a house. And it's the left-hand side of the image there on the left that would be created into the separate 1-bed unit. And then you can see that more closely on the right. And then this is the front of the existing house. So I suppose the main thing is you can see there is a clear split, a physical split in the property where the separate unit would be created. And you can see the garage on the ground floor and the dormers already existing, and the roof as exists. And then a closer up image of the part of the house that would be split off essentially into a separate unit. And this is looking back towards the access. So this is the driveway now, which will essentially become a shared driveway for the two properties. And then you can just see some of the trees which exist around within the garden area. And then this is the path that leads around the side of the house to the front, which would be the remaining portion, the larger section of the house. And then this is the path that runs around the other side of the house next to the newly created unit, and the access into that is from the side of the gable end of this property. And then there's this fenced area which would become the garden area for the new the smaller unit. And you can see that area delineated in there behind the fencing. So the appeal site, as you can see, is an existing house called Ocado House, located within the hamlet of Campmuir, accessed from the C443 public road. The existing house has 4 bedrooms and an integral garage. This will be subdivided at a natural break in the property, which exists such that 2 houses will be created, 1 larger 4-bedroom house and 1 smaller 1-bedroom house, created by converting the upper floor above the existing garage. The existing access will remain in use for both houses, with external parking dedicated to each house, along with a separate delineated garden area for the new smaller property. The reasons for refusal are: firstly, the proposal is poorly designed, fails to take account of local context, will have a negative impact on the visual amenity of the area and local character, and the proposal will be detrimental to residential amenity, and as such is contrary to NPF 4 Policy 14, Design Quality and Place. The proposal is contrary to LDP 2 Policy 1 Placemaking of the LDP, as the design, density and siting fails to respect the character and amenity of the place. And secondly, the proposal is contrary to NPF 4 Policy 17 Rural Homes, paragraph A, as the scale, siting and design of the proposal to subdivide the plot and create 2 semi-detached dwelling houses is not in keeping with the density and character of the area. The proposal is contrary to LDP 2 Policy 19, Housing in the Countryside, and the related supplementary guidance of the LDP, as the proposal does not extend a building group into a readily definable site. The proposal does not respect the character, scale and form of the existing group. The proposal does not respect and integrate into the existing building pattern. The proposal is not in keeping with the character of the area and will negatively impact the visual amenity of the group, and residential amenity will be negatively impacted by the proposal to subdivide the plot and create 2 semi-detached dwelling houses of marked contrast in scale and design. The assessment by the Planning Service notes that this area of Campmuir is very low density in character, with single dwelling houses positioned within larger plots. A pair of semi-detached dwelling houses would be incongruous with the local established character, building character, scale and form of the building group. The proposal is poorly designed and fails to take local context into account, will have a negative impact on the visual amenity of the area and will be detrimental to residential amenity. The proposal does not meet the criteria in the supplementary guidance, in that it does not integrate well into the existing building pattern and will negatively impact the visual amenity of the group. Existing trees are retained and new hedging will be provided for biodiversity. The Planning Service do not agree that the subdivision accords with NPF4 in terms of minimising emissions because it makes use of an existing building. It also does not agree that the proposal will contribute to meeting local housing needs by providing a smaller, more affordable option for perhaps a younger demographic, because there is no such identified local housing need for Camp Muir, and the delivery of good quality and affordable homes must be ensured through allocating enough land in the right location to meet current and future needs and aspirations. The case made by the applicant states that the precedence of NPF4 is noted, that NPF4 policy 17A7 allows for the subdivision of existing rural homes. The proposal will contribute to meeting local housing needs by providing a smaller, more affordable option. In terms of the character of the area, the scale of the proposal is in keeping with the area by utilising part of an existing dwelling, which makes efficient use of land and buildings and minimises pressure for new build development in the countryside. In terms of design policies, the proposal still retains its rural characteristics and is not detrimental to residential amenity. In terms of design quality and placemaking, the subdivision supports the 6 qualities of successful places. It is healthy, promoting well-being by maintaining access to natural surroundings, pleasant as the design harmonises with the existing building and landscape, is distinctive as it reflects the rural vernacular to preserve local identity, is sustainable by making use of the existing building by reducing resource demand, and the proposal illustrates adaptability, allowing flexibility in use over time while supporting local housing needs. There are not considered to be any adverse residential amenity impacts like overlooking or overshadowing, and there are sufficient unusable areas of private amenity space. And in terms of other considerations, there are no objections to the proposal, and there's no developer obligations required due to the small size of the resultant property. There is note from Roads requiring a condition, if necessary, to ensure no material dragging onto the access onto the public road. The only thing I would point out is there does not appear to be any foul drainage information submitted with the application, because this is essentially creating a separate dwelling house altogether, which could be disposed of separately as a separate planning unit. It's not ancillary. There should be some foul drainage information to demonstrate that the private drainage from the property can be provided.
Thank you very much. We'll go on to questions. I had one, but you've pretty much answered it. That was to clarify that it's not ancillary accommodations that are be sold off in a separate equity, or be sold as it be a create a separate title effectively for the land. I'm assuming that's right, is it?
Yes, convener. I mean, the application's been made as a subdivision to 2 dwelling houses. You have to therefore determine it on the basis that it's not ancillary.
Councillor Waters.
Thank you, convener. You mentioned in your report of handling there that from an affordability, you looked at the officers were looking at our affordable housing policy, which is often social housing, social rent housing plots, mid-market and stuff like that. Is there not something within there to provide, using the same words, but affordable housing that is more affordable housing, that is not as costly, shall we say, in the countryside, is also an important factor within planning as well? Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, councillor. So I suppose the answer is there's affordable housing and there's affordable housing. There's affordable housing that, as part of a much wider, larger development site, developers are required to provide a certain percentage of affordable housing on that site, whether that is to, for housing associations or private rental, or indeed the council will build affordable housing as well. And that's obviously based on housing need and the council's own housing needs and demands assessments and all these good things. There's also affordability in the more general sense of the word, which is a smaller property would ergo be more affordable than a big property. And I think what the applicant is suggesting is that it's, you know, the provision of a smaller property provides that range and mix where there is, I mean, I don't know personally, but is there more of a need for that in a rural location as opposed to an urban location? I'll leave that up to you to decide. The planning service is obviously looking at it from very much the, you know, in consultation with their housing colleagues, that there's no identified local housing need as such. So their role is much more about the delivery of good and affordable homes in the whole Perth and Kinross area.
Thank you.
Councillor Harvey.
Councillor Waters has asked my question again, so I've got no further questions.
Fine, members, I've got no further questions. So members, can we proceed to determine the application for review on the basis of the information before us? That is, the information contained within the papers, the presentation by the planning advisor, or do we require more information? Councillor Waters.
Happy to proceed.
Councillor Harvey.
Happy to proceed.
And I too am happy to proceed, and I'll start this one off again. Did a visit to the site. As you look at it, I have to say you can see a natural fit for it to be separated out. I think there's any question there. There's a little bit of a design there for it. But it comes back to the whole concept of planning and NPF4, LDP2, and it's really about placemaking. That's the first item policy in LDP2. It's respecting the character and the scale and the group and the area and the visual amenity. They are the important things. I suppose to sum it up, does it fit? That's what it's about. And the area, as we've heard, the plot of land behind has been approved for a further property, a detached property again. Taking all of this into account, whilst yes, the property could lend itself to be split into two, that is not the visual amenity. The character of the area, are detached properties. And as I say, the plot behind has been approved as a detached property. So my thoughts are that whilst yes, it could be done, and probably easily done, it doesn't reflect the character of the area. And on that basis, I feel I have to refuse the appeal on this occasion. Councillor Waters.
Thank you, convener. I'm going to go the opposite way and actually go for approval for this application. I do feel that I don't quite understand how the character of the area, because it's the same building that's literally going to be there. It's just going to be used in a different way. I do feel there is need for a lot of people. I do like to stay rural, but maybe don't have the means to buy a larger detached house, and this may give opportunities within there for individuals to do that. So as part of that, I would depending on what Councillor Harvey goes, but if it is, I think having suitable policies, suitable conditions for the foul drainage and that in place as well, just to ensure that officers are covering all the bases with this application would be appropriate. But happy to go for approval on this one.
Thank you very much. Councillor Harvey, going last is not always the best place to be, but on this occasion you're there, so this one's on you.
All the pressure on
you. I'm sorry. Yes.
But it's not my building, so it's not so much the pressure on me. I understand both my previous councillors' colleagues' comments there as well, but I'm similar to Councillor Waters. I'm going to turn down the refusal or accept the part of it. I understand the convener's comment regarding the nature of the properties in the local area, but I think, having visited this site as well, it's kind of difficult to see the property from the road unless you stop and look at it, and I don't think anyone's going to really notice too much of a difference. And as Councillor Waters also pointed out, these type of places are smaller places for people on a lower income, are few and far between. Therefore, I'm going to Is it overturn the refusal? Thanks. Uphold the appeal, sorry, uphold the appeal, thank you.
Thank you very much. In fairness to the applicant, it is a difficult call. I would say that, give you that. But on this occasion, Mr. McLeod, we have a majority decision to approve the appeal.
Thank you, convener. And just to double check, there was a proposal for a condition to be added in respect of the fell drainage as well.
Yeah, just to add to that, yeah, I would agree with Councillor Waters on that comment as well too. And was there any other outstanding ones as well, Paul?
It'd just be standard, yeah.
Oh, yes.
Yeah,
Yeah, the roads as well.
The roads as access.
Yeah.
and standard conditions, obviously. Councillor Waters, did you want to come in? Or you? Well, okay, fine. Okay, so on that basis, it's been approved. For you. As I say, it was a difficult call, but we're there. So on the majority, it's been approved for you. And that brings us to the end of this local review body today. So it only remains for me to say thank you to my colleagues for sitting in, and thank you to Mr. McLeod and Mrs. Tierney, and we'll see you on the next one. Thank you very much. And thank you to all of you as well. Thanks very much. Bye-bye. Bye-bye.